We're always told the next global crisis is going to be climate or AI, maybe another pandemic. But the evidence, well, it suggests a different threat is vectoring in. It's a systemic failure hiding in plain sight, and it's governed by the same brutal mathematics that trigger a market collapse.
So, picture this. The scene isn't a trading floor. It's 2,000 kilometers above the Earth. The time is 0415 Coordinated Universal Time. A single Russian missile defense satellite, a critical piece of their nuclear tripwire, just stops transmitting. And on the ground, a data stream flatlines. Silence.
For the operators staring at those screens, this is a moment of pure, terrifying ambiguity. Their early warning system, which, let's be honest, is already shaky, now has a massive blind spot. And right in the middle of a global crisis, they have to make a call, and they have to make it fast. Was this just a random glitch on an old satellite? Was it a collision with a piece of junk nobody was tracking? Or was it the first shot in a war? A deliberate, blinding strike from an enemy weapon?
Now, the really terrifying truth here is that it's almost impossible to tell the difference. And the reason why reveals a fundamental fragility, not just in military systems, but in the entire architecture of our modern world. So to understand this threat, you don't look in war rooms. You look at the physics of a financial collapse.
Yeah, that's right. To see the future of orbit, we have to look at the past behavior of markets. Because when you get under the hood, these two complex systems, they're not just similar. They are functionally identical. They are buckling under the exact same pressures, and they are hurtling toward the same breaking point.
So let's break this down, because the parallel is frankly alarming. In a market bubble, right, the asset is a stock, and it's driven by speculative greed. The hidden risk? Counterparty failure. The person on the other side of your bet can't pay up. Okay, now look at Orbit. The asset is a satellite slot driven by a race for short-term profit, and the hidden risk? A tiny piece of untracked debris. For both systems, the critical event is the same, a cascading, self-reinforcing collapse. For markets, we call it a systemic crash. For Orbit, it has a much scarier name, the Kessler syndrome. That's a runaway's chain reaction of collisions where the debris from one crash creates even more debris, causing more crashes, until the entire orbital highway becomes completely unusable for generations. In the models that physicists use to predict financial crashes, they found this really weird property. They call it parameter sloppiness. What it means is that as a system gets closer and closer to the edge, a lot of the small specific variables become almost irrelevant. You can change them around a whole lot, and the final outcome, the crash, it still looks pretty much the same. This is exactly why we can all feel a bubble, right? But nobody, not a single expert, can ever pinpoint the exact day it's going to pop. The system's path is basically locked in, even if the specific trigger is a total mystery. And this chart, it shows you exactly what I mean. Some parameters are what we call stiff. They have a huge, predictable impact. For Orbit, that's the total mass of stuff we've launched up there. It's a clear measure of stress on the system. But the most important parameter, the one the model calls TC, or the exact time of the critical collision, that one is sloppy. It's super sensitive, it depends on thousands of other little things, and this sloppiness is what's so dangerous. It creates this illusion of stability right before the whole thing breaks apart. So here's the crucial point. While we can't predict the exact moment of the crash, the same math we use to analyze markets can spot the invisible signs that the system is about to fail. These tools reveal deep structural shifts in the data, warning us that a critical transition is coming. The system is getting brittle. Okay, so if the danger is so obvious from a systems point of view, why do we keep launching thousands of new satellites every single year? It's because of a powerful, very comforting, and deeply flawed assumption. This is the villain of our story, a fiction that's been incredibly convenient. We call it the big sky lie. And the logic, it seems pretty solid on the surface. Space is unimaginably vast, right? So the idea of two tiny man-made objects just happening to bump into each other, it feels like a statistical impossibility. And for the first 50 years of the space age, this theory basically governed everything, allowing for totally unregulated expansion into orbit. And then it was proven catastrophically wrong. At 1656 UTC, an active Iridium communication satellite slammed into a dead Russian military satellite right over Siberia. The impact, at a combined speed of over 26,000 miles per hour, basically vaporized both machines. And in an instant, it created a cloud of over 200,000 lethal, untrackable fragments. The big sky was suddenly demonstrably not big enough. So what's driving this behavior, even after the risks became so clear?
It's the same economic force that destroys fisheries and rainforests, a classic tragedy of the commons. Think about it. Every company that launches a satellite gets 100% of the profit. But the risk, the addition of one more object, one more potential point of failure, that gets socialized across every single operator, every nation, every person on Earth who depends on space. The incentive is crystal clear. Launch now and let the future deal with the mess.
And believe me, those consequences are accelerating. A 2023 FAA report projects that within just a decade, we could see 28,000 pieces of hazardous debris surviving re-entry and hitting the Earth's surface every single year. This isn't just a problem up there anymore. The system is so saturated, its failures are literally starting to rain down on us.
This brings us to the hero of our story. And no, it's not some sci-fi space laser or giant net. It's a new strategy, a new way of seeing and managing the problem. And we're borrowing it directly from the world of high finance. We call it the Kessler ticker. The fatal mistake we're making right now is just counting pieces of debris. That's like trying to measure market risk by counting the number of shares traded. It totally misses the point. The solution is to stop counting objects and start measuring the system's fragility in real time, just like a credit risk analyst watches a country's bond market for signs of default. So here's how this new model works. First, we model low Earth orbit as one single, interconnected financial system, where every object is linked to every other object. Second, we create a real-time index, our Kessler ticker, that measures system-wide fragility, not just the raw number of junk pieces. And third, and this is the absolute game changer, we use that index to price in the collision risk for every new launch. You want to put a satellite into orbit? Fine. You have to pay an insurance premium based on the systemic risk you're adding. And in one move, the externality is internalized. Suddenly, bad behavior becomes expensive, and good stewardship, that becomes profitable.
So why is this so urgent? Because the consequences of a systemic failure in orbit, they aren't abstract. They are immediate and they will cascade through every single part of modern life. Let's just walk through what happens after the crash, the second-order effects that nobody ever seems to think about. First, the global positioning system goes down. And it's not just about the maps on your phone. GPS is really a global timing utility. Those hyper-accurate timing signals that provide the heartbeat for the entire global economy, they just vanish.
Without those GPS timing signals, high-frequency trading just stops. Instantly. ATMs fail. Credit card networks go dark. The entire global banking system, which relies on perfectly synchronized timestamps for every transaction, just seizes up.
At the same time, our ability to monitor our own planet is crippled. Of the 44 essential variables we use for tracking climate change, 26 of them depend completely on satellites. Ice sheets, sea levels, atmospheric carbon, our planetary dashboard, our eyes on our own world suddenly goes dark.
And then, of course, there's national security. The U.S. military relies on commercial satellites, like that Iridium constellation, for over 80% of its wartime communications. Precision-guided weapons, drone operations, battlefield logistics, the information advantage that defines modern warfare just evaporates.
So, what's the playbook? It's a strategic shift in how we think. First, build that shared real-time map of orbital risk, the Kessler ticker. Use it to price access to orbit based on the true probability of a collision. Mandate verifiable end-of-life deorbiting for every new thing we send up. We have to stop letting companies privatize their profits while they socialize their risk. And the most important rule of all, start measuring system fragility, not just counting objects. Which brings us right back to where we started, 0415 UTC, the silent Russian satellite. With this new lens, we see that the initial question, accident or attack, it's the wrong question. In a system this fragile, this sloppy, the distinction barely even matters. A random piece of debris can be just as strategically decisive as a hypersonic weapon. So the real question, the one we have to answer right now, is this. How many more accidents can this system absorb before the entire thing shatters?